The morning light slanted through the windows of Harbor's Edge Café, casting long shadows across the polished counter. Rachel Matthews wiped down the surface with practiced strokes, her movements mechanical after a year of the same routine. Outside, the harbor was still waking up, fishing boats gently bobbing, early gulls circling in the pale blue sky. It was 7:14 a.m. on a quiet Tuesday in October, and the café was nearly empty except for old Henry, nursing his usual black coffee in the corner booth. Rachel tucked a wayward strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. 26 years old. 2 community college classes on pause. A stack of unpaid medical bills waiting at home. This wasn't where she imagined herself, but it was where she was needed. There was something honest about this work, something that kept her showing up beyond the paycheck. Maybe it was the way one warm smile and a well-timed refill could make someone's morning just a little brighter. Small kindnesses, she believed in them the way some people believe in salvation. And before we go further, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. Let us see how far kindness can travel today. Then came the sound she always listened for, the soft jingle of the cafe door. She looked up, customer service smile already in place. But the man who entered wasn't he like the regulars. He stood uncertainly in the doorway, perhaps 50, maybe older, hard to tell. His weathered face was partly hidden behind an unkempt salt and pepper beard. His jacket had once been navy, now a constellation of stains and worn edges. His shoes told the same story, long miles, hard times. Rachel's smile didn't waver. The cafe had an unwritten policy about people like him. Carson, the manager, had made it clear enough, we're not running a soup kitchen. They drive away the tourists. But Rachel had never been good at turning away hungry eyes. Cold morning, huh? She said, her voice warm with genuine concern. Take a seat. Coffee's fresh. The man hesitated, his gaze darting around the empty cafe as if expecting to be ejected at any moment. His shoulders were hunched, a defensive posture Rachel had seen before in people who'd learned the hard way to expect rejection. I don't have money, he said finally, the admission clearly painful. Rachel was already reaching for a mug. That's okay, she replied softly, pouring the steaming liquid with care. Everyone deserves something warm on a morning like this. He moved slowly toward the counter, each step weighted with what seemed like years of hesitation. As he settled onto a stool, Rachel noted the way his hands trembled slightly. Not from addiction, she thought, but from cold, hunger, and perhaps the particular kind of exhaustion that comes from having nowhere safe to rest. Thank you, he whispered, wrapping his hands around the mug as if it were a precious artifact. My name's Frank. I'm Rachel, she answered, then turned toward the kitchen. You know what, Frank? We've got some extra eggs this morning. Cook always makes too much for the morning prep. If you were in Rachel's shoes, would you offer that plate of eggs anyway? Comment 1 for yes, kindness first, or 2 for no, it's too risky. This was a lie, but a small one, she reasoned. The eggs would cost the cafe perhaps $4. What was $4 compared to a man's dignity? In the kitchen, she quickly scrambled 2 eggs, added a slice of toast, and arranged a small portion of potatoes that had been prepared for the morning rush. Nothing fancy, just simple, nourishing food that wouldn't draw attention. When she placed the plate before Frank, his eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, Rachel caught a glimpse of who he might have been before whatever circumstances had led him here, someone's father, perhaps, or someone's friend. Someone who mattered. I can't, he began, but Rachel waved away his protest. Just eat while it's hot, she said gently. It'll be our secret. Frank's fork hovered above the plate for a moment before he took his first bite. Rachel busied herself wiping down the already clean counter, allowing him the privacy to eat without scrutiny. This wasn't charity in her mind, it was basic human decency. She didn't notice Carson watching through the kitchen door until it was too late. The swinging door burst open with such force that it slammed against the wall, causing Frank to flinch violently and nearly drop his fork. Carson Mercer strode into the front of the cafe, his face flushed with the particular shade of red that came from self-righteous anger. At 35, he carried himself with the exaggerated authority of someone who'd been given a small amount of power and mistaken it for importance. "What is this?" he demanded, gesturing toward Frank with a stabbing motion of his finger. "What do you think you're doing, Rachel?" Rachel straightened, instinctively positioning herself between Carson and Frank. "He was just cold. I gave him some coffee and—" "You served him?" Carson's voice rose an octave, drawing the attention of old Henry in the corner. "This isn't a charity. This is a business. We've talked about this." Frank stood up quickly, nearly knocking over his stool. "It's okay. I didn't ask for anything. She just—" "Get out," Carson said, voice like steel. "Now." The cafe had fallen into a terrible silence. Rachel felt a hot flush of shame and anger rising in her cheeks. "Carson, please. It's just eggs. I'll pay for them myself." Carson turned to her, his expression somehow both smug and furious. "And you," he said, "you're fired. Clock out now. I've warned you before about this bleeding heart nonsense." The words hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. Rachel felt her stomach drop. She needed this job, desperately needed it. Her mind raced to her rent payment due in a week, to the antibiotic prescription waiting at the pharmacy, to the promise she'd made to her mother to start saving for school again. Frank began backing toward the door. "I'm so sorry," he murmured, distress evident in every line of his face. "I never meant." "It's not your fault," Rachel said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. She turned back to Carson, who was watching with cold satisfaction. For a moment, she considered begging, explaining about the bills, about her mother's hopes, about the impossibility of finding another job quickly in their small coastal town. Instead, she reached behind her back and untied her apron. "If kindness is against your policy," she said, each word careful and measured, "then I don't want to work here anyway." She placed the folded apron on the counter between them like a declaration. The bravado felt hollow against the rising panic about what came next, but something in her refused to bend on this. Some principles were worth the cost, even when the cost was terribly high. Have you ever paid the price for doing the right thing? Share your story below, you might give someone hope today. Carson's lip curled. "Always the martyr. Clean out your locker and be gone in 5 minutes." The bell above the door jingled again, drawing all eyes. A new customer had entered, a man of medium height wearing a dark hoodie and baseball cap pulled low, with large sunglasses obscuring much of his face. He stood just inside the doorway, taking in the scene before him. There was something about his presence that changed the energy in the room, a quiet intensity that commanded attention without demanding it. When he removed his sunglasses, Rachel felt a jolt of recognition. Keanu Reeves. It wasn't entirely surprising to see celebrities in their town. The picturesque harbor attracted film productions every few years, and rumors had been circulating about a new project starting up. Still, his appearance in this particular moment felt surreal, as if someone had spliced together scenes from two entirely different movies. Carson's demeanor transformed instantly. "Mr. Reeves," he exclaimed, all obsequious charm now. "What an honor to have you visit Harbor's Edge. Please, let me get you our best table." Keanu didn't move. His eyes, Thoughtful and strangely sorrowful, moved from Carson to Rachel to Frank, who was frozen near the door. "Is that how you treat people who show compassion?" he asked, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable gravity. Carson's face paled. I'm sorry, I didn't know she was with you." "She wasn't," Keanu said simply. "But she is now. Has anyone ever stood up for you when you felt completely alone? What did that moment mean to you? Let us know in the comments." A glacial silence fell over the café. Old Henry in the corner actually put down his newspaper. Rachel felt as though she were watching the scene from somewhere outside herself, unable to process what was happening. Carson attempted to recover, smoothing his shirt nervously. "Mr. Reeves, if you just give me a moment, I can explain the situation. We have policies about—" "No need," Keanu interrupted, still in that same measured tone. "I've seen enough. I came here today for a meeting about possibly investing in this cafe. I've been looking for local businesses with character to support." His eyes met Carson's directly. "But I don't invest in places where cruelty is disguised as management." Rachel blinked, trying to make sense of his words. "You saw everything?" Keanu nodded, his expression gentle as he addressed her. "From outside. I was early for the meeting and happened to witness what occurred." He turned to Frank. "Sir, would you do me the honor of joining me for breakfast?" "My treat." Frank's weathered face registered disbelief. "You want to eat with me?" "I'd be privileged," Keanu replied with complete sincerity. Carson looked stricken, the implications of what was happening beginning to dawn on him. "Mr. Reeves, perhaps we could still discuss." "I think we're done discussing," Keanu said. "Rachel, if you're available, I'd like to speak with you as well. About potential employment." Rachel found her voice at last. "Employment?" Keanu nodded. "I have a production company. We're always looking for people with integrity." The reality of what was happening finally penetrated Carson's consciousness. His face cycled through shock, anger, and finally calculation. "Now wait a minute," he began, "Rachel is actually one of our most valued employees. There's been a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Keanu said quietly, "is thinking that how we treat the most vulnerable doesn't matter." He gestured toward a table in the corner. "Frank? Rachel? Shall we?" As if in a dream, Rachel followed Frank and Keanu to the table, leaving Carson standing at the counter, mouth opening and closing without sound. She felt lightheaded, caught between the adrenaline of losing her job and the surreal turn of events. Old Henry, who had witnessed everything, raised his coffee mug in a silent toast as they passed. The next few hours unfolded with the strange logic of a fever dream. Over breakfast, which Keanu insisted on ordering for all of them, the full Harbor's Edge special with all the fixings, Frank's story gradually emerged. He had been a construction worker, a family man with a wife and daughter. Then came the accident on the job site, the surgeries, the opioid prescriptions that became an addiction, the downward spiral that cost him his family, his home, his identity. 6 months sober now, he said quietly, a flicker of pride in his eyes. But when you've been down this far, people only see what you were, not what you're trying to become. "I see it," Rachel said firmly. Keanu listened attentively, asking questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than voyeuristic curiosity. There was something about his presence that made the extraordinary situation feel strangely normal. His focus was complete, his ego absent from the interaction. The cafe had begun to fill with the regular morning crowd, many of whom did double takes upon spotting Keanu. Carson had retreated to the kitchen, occasionally peering out with a mixture of resentment and calculation. "I meant what I said," Keanu told Rachel as they finished their meal. My production company is setting up locally for the next 6 months. We need people who understand this community. Rachel hesitated. I don't have experience in film production. But you have experience in humanity, he replied. That's harder to teach. He pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. Come to this address tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock. We'll find something that fits your skills. When they finally stood to leave, Keanu insisted on paying not just for their meal but leaving a tip that made the waitress who had taken over Rachel's section gasp audibly. As they walked toward the door, he paused at the counter where Carson had reappeared. I believe in second chances, Keanu said quietly. But second chances require recognition of where we went wrong the first time. He placed his untouched business card on the counter. Something to consider. Outside, the morning had bloomed into a perfect autumn day. The harbor sparkled in the sunlight, fishing boats and pleasure craft creating a gentle ballet on the water. What happens now? Frank asked, blinking in the brightness. Keanu considered him thoughtfully. My foundation works with veterans and people in transition. We have resources, housing, job training, medical support. If you're interested. Frank's eyes widened. Just like that? Just like that, Keanu confirmed. Sometimes the universe conspires to put the right people in the right place at the right time. I believe in honoring those moments. By the following week, the story had spread throughout the town. It traveled in whispers across coffee shops and grocery store aisles, expanding and contracting with each retelling until it had taken on an almost mythical quality. In some versions, Keanu had bought the café on the spot. In others, he'd publicly humiliated Carson with a scathing speech about humanity. The truth, as always, was both more ordinary and more extraordinary. Rachel did indeed go to the address Keanu had given her. It led to a converted warehouse near the harbor that was serving as a temporary production office. After a brief interview, she was offered a position as a location scout assistant, her knowledge of the town and its people proving invaluable to a production trying to integrate authentically into the community. Frank entered a program sponsored by Keanu's foundation. He was given temporary housing and enrolled in a vocational rehabilitation program designed specifically for people rebuilding their lives. Within weeks, the haunted look in his eyes had begun to fade, replaced by something tentative but unmistakable, hope. As for Carson and Harbor's Edge Café, the consequences of that morning were both swift and surprising. Word of what had happened spread quickly through social media. Local patrons began asking uncomfortable questions. Online reviews mentioned the incident. Business declined precipitously. 2 weeks later, the owner of the cafe, an absentee investor who lived in Seattle, flew in for an emergency meeting. By the end of the day, Carson had been terminated. The owner, facing a public relations nightmare, reached out to Keanu's production company for guidance. What happened next was a testament to Keanu's philosophy about second chances. Rather than allowing the cafe to close, which would have meant unemployment for the remaining staff, Keanu's foundation proposed a partnership. Harbor's Edge would be rebranded as Second Chance Cafe, with a new mission. It would train and employ people transitioning from homelessness, addiction, or incarceration. Profits would be reinvested in community support programs. 3 months after that fateful morning, the newly renovated cafe held its grand reopening. Rachel, who had excelled in her production role, was invited to serve as community liaison between the cafe and the foundation. Frank, having completed the first phase of his vocational program, was hired as part of the training staff, his construction background proving valuable during the renovation, his personal experience essential for mentoring others. Keanu himself attended the opening, though he declined to make speeches or take center stage. "This isn't about me," he insisted. This is about what happens when we recognize each other's humanity. The rebranded café became something of a local phenomenon. Tourists came initially for the celebrity connection, but returned for the exceptional food and service. Locals embraced it as an example of their community's values. Within 6 months, the model had proven so successful that plans were underway to open similar establishments in neighboring towns. Do you believe people deserve second chances? Comment 1 if you've given someone one, 2 if you've received one, or both. On the 1-year anniversary of that transformative morning, Rachel stood behind the counter of Second Chance Cafe, watching the familiar choreography of servers and customers with a sense of pride. The walls were now adorned with local artwork and photographs, a community gallery that changed monthly. One section, dubbed the Wall of Dignity, featured Polaroid photos of program graduates, each image accompanied by a handwritten note about their journey. Frank, now a senior staff trainer, was instructing a new cohort of employees near the espresso machine. His beard was neatly trimmed these days, his eyes clear and focused. He had reconnected with his daughter in recent months, a tentative rebuilding of bridges long thought burned. Rachel's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Keanu, who had finished filming months ago but remained connected to the project. Happy anniversary. Still believe in small kindnesses? Rachel smiled, looking around at what had grown from that simple act of compassion. More than ever, she typed back. As she slipped her phone into her pocket, the bell above the door jingled. Rachel looked up, customer service smile in place, ready to welcome whoever might enter with the same genuine warmth she had offered Frank a year ago. Because if there was one lesson she had learned, it was this: you never knew when a small act of kindness might create ripples that would transform not just one life, but an entire community. Sometimes, the cost of doing the right thing feels too high in the moment. But Rachel had discovered that what seemed like a devastating loss, her job, her security, her plans, had actually been the doorway to something far greater than she could have imagined. It wasn't about Keanu Reeves or lucky interventions. Those were catalysts, perhaps, but not the heart of the story. The heart was simpler and more profound, the recognition that beneath our circumstances, our appearances, our mistakes and missteps, we share a common humanity. And honoring that humanity, even when it comes at a personal cost, is never wasted. Near the register hung a small, framed photograph. It captured a moment most patrons wouldn't recognize: Rachel handing a plate to Frank across the counter of the old Harbor's Edge Cafe. And visible through the window behind them, a blurry figure in a baseball cap, watching. A moment before everything changed. But really, everything had already changed with that first simple act: a cup of coffee offered without judgment, eggs served with dignity instead of pity. The rest was just the universe acknowledging what Rachel had already known: that kindness matters, that people matter, that how we treat each other defines not just who we are, but the world we create together. As the cafe filled with the lunch crowd, Rachel caught Frank's eye across the room. He nodded slightly, a gesture that contained their shared journey. Then he turned back to his trainee, demonstrating once again how to make the perfect pour-over coffee, with attention, with care, with the understanding that sometimes what people need most isn't just what's in the cup, but how it's given. Who is the kindest person you've ever met, and what did they do for you? Comment below, your story might change someone's day. And if this story touched your heart, hit like, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Motivation for Success for more real, powerful stories. Outside, the harbor continued its eternal rhythm. Boats came and went. The tide ebbed and flowed. And within the warmth of Second Chance Cafe, lives continued to be transformed, one cup, one plate, one moment of recognition at a time. To truly understand the impact of kindness, one must recognize how rare true compassion has become in our hurried world. Rachel's simple act of offering coffee and eggs wasn't extraordinary in itself, but it represented something increasingly precious: the willingness to see beyond appearances, to recognize human dignity regardless of circumstance. Her choice came from a deep-seated belief that every person deserves basic respect, a belief she held even when it conflicted with rules and conventions. What makes this story resonate is not just the fairy tale intervention of Keanu Reeves, but the universality of the moral choice Rachel faced. We've all encountered moments where doing what's right conflicts with what's safe or convenient. The homeless man nursing a free coffee in the corner, the colleague being unfairly criticized in a meeting, the stranger struggling with heavy bags while others hurry past. These are the small crucibles of character that reveal who we truly are. Frank's journey from that first meal to becoming a mentor himself illustrates how powerfully validation can affect a person's trajectory. The world had reduced him to a problem, a stereotype, something to be avoided or managed. Rachel's simple acknowledgement of his humanity, followed by Keanu's more substantial intervention, didn't just provide material support, it restored his sense of worth and possibility. The transformation of Harbor's Edge into Second Chance Cafe serves as a metaphor for how communities can reimagine their values and structures. What had been a place of exclusion became a center of inclusion and healing. The cafe's success demonstrated that compassion and good business aren't mutually exclusive, that enterprises built on genuine values can thrive economically while nurturing social good. The ripple effects of kindness extend far beyond their initial impact. Rachel's momentary courage didn't just help Frank, it eventually created a supportive environment for dozens of others in similar circumstances. Her willingness to accept the consequences of her compassion, potentially catastrophic as they seemed in the moment, ultimately opened doors she couldn't have imagined. Perhaps the most profound message in this story is the one Rachel herself realized: that transformative kindness isn't dependent on celebrity intervention or dramatic rescues. While Keanu's appearance provided a satisfying plot twist, the truly heroic act was her simple, quiet decision to treat a struggling human being with dignity, regardless of the personal cost. In our increasingly divided world, small acts of human recognition carry revolutionary potential. They remind us that beneath our differences and despite our hardships, we share a common longing for connection and respect. When Rachel poured that cup of coffee, when she served those eggs with dignity instead of pity, she wasn't just feeding a hungry man, she was affirming a vision of society where no one is disposable, where everyone deserves to be seen. The story asks us to consider not only how we treat others, but how we might respond when we witness unkindness. Old Henry's silent toast from the corner represented the quiet approval many feel but fail to express when witnessing compassion. Keanu's more dramatic intervention reminds us that those with power and privilege have special opportunities to amplify and support acts of kindness. Between these responses lies a spectrum of possible actions, each with the potential to strengthen the fabric of human connection. In the end, the photograph hanging by the register captures the essence of the story, not because it featured a celebrity in the background, but because it preserved the moment when Rachel chose kindness despite the risk. Every day, countless similar choices are made around the world, most without witness or reward. But each one matters, each one changes something, each one sends ripples outward in ways we cannot fully calculate. As Rachel learned, kindness isn't just something we offer others, it's something that transforms us as well. Her journey from waitress to community liaison wasn't just a change in employment, it represented a deep,